I never thought I would end up watching a detective lift the lid on a plastic storage bin in Cynthia Puit's garage at 6:03 in the evening, revealing a nest of unopened boxes containing insulin pumps, a custom knee brace, and my $4,200 CPAP machine still wearing the medical device patient-specific tape like a hostage gag. There were at least 15 boxes stacked in that bin alone, each one labeled with a date and patient category in Cynthia's precise handwriting. The HOA president stood there with a thin smile and said those were on common property. The detective looked at her with zero amusement and replied that is not how grand theft works. I remember feeling my hands shake as I recognized my own name written on a label in her meticulous purple ink. Let me back up. I moved to Maple Crest Reserve in Fallon Heights because I wanted quiet. I am a programmer who speak whispers even on Zoom calls, and I dreamed of backyard string lights and tending to a basil plant that I admittedly overwater like a nervous parent. I keep to myself, pay my dues on time, and wave at everyone like a neighbor in an insurance commercial. My life was predictable and peaceful until my doctor sent me for a sleep study. After a lousy night in the sleep clinic revealed I stopped breathing about 40 times an hour, the specialist said I needed a CPAP machine immediately. Not just any machine, but a custom-fitted one with titanium nasal prongs because apparently my sinuses are shaped like a cul-de-sac and standard equipment would not create a proper seal. The price tag made me wince, but breathing through the night seemed worth $4,200. That is when I met Cynthia Puit, and my peaceful life evaporated. Cynthia is the HOA president, and she wears cardigans like armor. She carries a clipboard with laminated tabs everywhere she goes, and her eyes catalog offenses like a barcode scanner. I have seen her write violation notices for mailbox paint that is 0.3 shades off regulation beige. I have watched her measure dandelion stems with a ruler. She once fined a neighbor for parking their own car in their own driveway because it was facing the wrong direction. I thought if I stayed invisible, I would be fine. I was wrong. The package arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I tracked it obsessively because this CPAP was not just expensive, it was custom molded to my face. 11 minutes after the delivery driver left, it vanished from my porch. I checked my doorbell camera and saw only a blur of floral scarf and a teal golf cart idling at the curb. My heart sank. I posted the footage to the neighborhood listserv asking if anyone had seen anything. Within an hour, Cynthia emailed the entire community accusing a certain single man, obviously meaning me, of attracting porch pirates with unnecessary deliveries. I stared at my screen in disbelief. I replied to the thread with a clearer still from the video showing the floral scarf pattern. Cynthia responded in all caps that it was obviously me testing the integrity of the HOA security protocols. I stared at my screen trying to understand how reporting a theft made me the criminal. By Friday morning, I had 3 violation notices taped to my door. One cited improper signage, referring to the house numbers painted on my curb in the exact font the HOA required last year. When I checked the bylaws, I discovered Cynthia had updated the font requirement 2 weeks ago without notifying anyone. Another mentioned nocturnal noise, which I assume meant the cicadas living in my maple tree. The third accused me of storing medical equipment visible from public view. I did not have any medical equipment because someone stole it. The irony was not lost on me. Each violation came with a $50 fine and a deadline to remedy within 72 hours. I calculated that following her contradictory demands would cost me over $800 in landscaping changes, new curb paint, and apparently cicada relocation services. I knocked on Cynthia's door that evening to ask for help locating my package. She opened the door, looked over my shoulder at my basil plant on the porch, and said with complete seriousness that herbs count as landscaping not agriculture and that I needed to submit a variance request. I stood there speechless as she closed the door in my face. I went home and ordered my sister's orthopedic knee brace as a favor since she lives 2 states away. I figured lightning would not strike twice. Lightning struck twice. The custom brace disappeared from my porch the following Tuesday. This time, however, the shipping company had installed a tamper sensor after my first complaint. My phone buzzed with a text that made my blood run cold. Package opened at 1424 Wren Court. That was Cynthia's address. I sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to decide what to do. I called the non-emergency line thinking I would get a shrug and maybe a case number for insurance. Instead, Detective Lena Quesada showed up 30 minutes later with a USPS postal inspector named Rodriguez because the parcels had gone through federal mail. Apparently, Stealing mail is not just a crime, it is a federal offense that carries serious prison time. Detective Quesada was in her late 30s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and she treated my case like it mattered. We watched from Detective Quesada's unmarked car as Cynthia ferried a box from her teal golf cart into her garage. She made 3 trips in 20 minutes, each time checking over her shoulder before entering. The detective pointed out the key fob dangling from Cynthia's wrist labeled pool, tennis, and charmingly, mail. Inspector Rodriguez took photographs and made notes in a federal incident report. The postal inspector made a call, and within an hour they had enough for a warrant. Detective Quesada told me they had been receiving complaints about missing packages in Maple Crest for 8 months but could never prove who was taking them. My tamper sensor had finally given them the break they needed. I sat in my living room that night unable to sleep, wondering if I had just hallucinated the entire thing. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening. I expected the usual lecture about mailbox color compliance or lawn edging angles. Instead, Detective Quesada stood at the front of the community clubhouse with a projector. The board members looked confused. Cynthia sat in her usual seat, cardigan perfectly pressed, clipboard on her lap. Detective Quesada dimmed the lights and played my Ring doorbell footage, the GPS pings from the shipping company, and a screenshot of Cynthia posting on Nextdoor about rescuing abandoned medical goods for community safety. The room went silent. The postal inspector stepped forward and explained in a calm but firm voice that rescuing mail you did not order is called a felony. The board's vice president, a man who once received a citation from Cynthia for wind chimes that were allegedly 3 decibels too cheerful, motioned to suspend Cynthia's authority immediately. 3 hands shot up, then all of them. Suddenly everyone remembered a missing package. Someone mentioned a nebulizer. Another person brought up a TENS unit. Grandma Ruth stood up and said her compression socks were rerouted to the clubhouse 6 months ago and she thought she had just forgotten where she ordered them. The next morning, Detective Quesada arrived with a warrant. I watched from my porch as she and 2 officers approached Cynthia's garage. The door rolled up, and I saw what can only be described as a boutique of other people's health. There were labeled bins organized by medical category, respiratory equipment in blue bins, mobility aids in green, diabetes supplies in yellow. A spreadsheet taped to the wall tracked intake dates, original owners when she could identify them, and estimated values. There was a hand-painted sign reading Community Wellness Intake by Appointment Only. Cynthia stood in her driveway trying to maintain composure. She said she was reducing porch clutter per Section 7 of the HOA bylaws. Detective Quesada held up my CPAP machine like it was Excalibur pulled from stone and said Section 7 does not let you breathe for strangers. They carried out bin after bin. There was a cash box with petty donations totaling over $3,000 that Cynthia claimed were voluntary contributions for her services. They found the HOA master mailbox key on a lanyard, which explained how she accessed packages before residents even knew they had arrived. Then there was a folder titled Incident Reports. Inside that folder were photographs Cynthia had taken of neighbors' bedrooms through open blinds, printed and labeled curtains non-compliant. There were photos of people's garages labeled unauthorized storage, and images of children's toys in yards marked unapproved recreational items. My stomach turned. This was not just about stealing packages. This was about control, surveillance, and a complete disregard for privacy or basic human decency. As they carried the bins to the curb, the entire cul-de-sac lined up like it was Black Friday. Everyone pointed and identified their missing sterile treasures. I stood there holding my CPAP, the machine I had not been able to use for weeks, and I laughed for the first time in a month. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that happens when reality becomes so absurd you cannot process it any other way. Cynthia Puit was charged with grand theft, mail theft, and unlawful surveillance. The prosecutor added 18 counts of mail fraud and 23 counts of theft for each individual victim they could identify. When the judge read the charges in court 2 months later, her face went pale. She tried to speak, to explain her community service intentions, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm and whispered for her to stay quiet. The judge was not interested in explanations. She was ordered to pay full restitution to every victim, totaling over $47,000. She had to complete 400 hours of community service at the county medical clinic, specifically in the equipment distribution center where she would help people receive the very items she had stolen. She was required to wear an ankle monitor that chirps whenever she drifts within 10 feet of any residential porch. The judge also barred her from any HOA leadership position for 10 years and ordered her to post a front yard sign, chosen by the board, reading "This property is under new management, the law." The sign had to remain visible for 5 years. As the bailiff explained the terms, Cynthia stared straight ahead, her clipboard clutched in her lap like a life raft, her knuckles white with tension, finally silent for the first time since anyone in Maple Crest had known her.